Barnes Wallace sits at a desk lit by a single lamp, tracing the thin line between impossible idea and necessary weapon. He studies photographs of German industrial valleys, the webs of canals and turbines, the concrete hearts that steady whole regions. He knows that high-altitude bombing will scatter across roofs and streets. What must be broken is the dam itself, not from above, but at the foot where concrete meets water and pressure climbs like a giant unseen hand. He begins with scale models and bathtubs, with spheres of wood and metal, with the simple physics of stone that can be skipped across a pond. A charge must ride the surface, then grip the wall, then detonate underwater where shock waves do not bleed into open air. The answer is backspin. Spin keeps the weapon kissing the surface, keeps it from diving too soon, pulls it down the face of the dam after impact. It sounds like a child's game until the numbers stack into engineering. Resistance arrives first in memos and raised eyebrows. The device will be heavy. The Lancaster bomber will need to shed armor to accept risk. Pilots will have to fly at a height that most training manuals call lethal. Wallace writes detailed notes, builds new models, moves from drawing board to a wind tunnel to sea trials on the Kent coast at Culver. Early drops shatter casings or dive too soon. He changes dimensions, alters the spin rate, refines the wooden slats that carry the skin of the bomb. On the airfields, crews learn a new language of precision. Low level at night is not romance. It is wires and church spires. It is a black river that looks level until the altimeter wavers. Veterans would later recall the stomach held tight during practice runs over reservoirs, the smell of hot oil, the vibration of the airframe at treetop height, and a mild disbelief of ground crew watching propellers pass over hedges. Instructors develop tools that turn daring into repeatable craft. Two converging spotlights beneath the fuselage create a bright V on the water that meets at exactly 18 meters. The navigator calls out speed while the pilot holds the aircraft steady, reading a lake as if it were a runway. The bomb aimer peers through a simple triangular sight designed to fix the distance to massive towers. The device in the bomb bay spins up like a millstone, a rising hum that settles into a heavy purr. Wallace watches the final trials as a column of water lifts and falls. Concrete is not invincible. The rip-rap shakes, the wall flexes, and the spillway roars with sudden life. A concept has crossed the threshold from idea to method. The men who will carry it now have a way to live through the first seconds of each run. The risk remains immense, but the purpose is finally clear. Break the dam at its root, and the river will do the rest. Engines warm in the dark like contained thunder. Crews move by torchlight, faces pale under soot and windburn, hands steady from repetition. Weeks of practice have narrowed their world to altimeters, airspeed, and the black ribbon of water slipping between moorland and stone. The order is simple and brutal. Fly low, fly lower. Make the impossible routine. Each night, the instructors drive them back to the same truths. Precision lives in muscle memory. The altimeter lies near the ground, so trust the converging spotlights slung beneath the fuselage. When the twin beams touch on the surface, the aircraft is at attack height. Hold it there. The reservoirs of Derwent and Ibrook become silent classrooms, their walls looming out of the dark like cliffs. Pilots learn to read ripples for wind, tree lines for cross currents, and the sudden white shock of a bird strike as just another variable to ride out. Navigators plot hairline routes along valleys and rail cuts, sketching turns to the second, building a map that fits inside a shaking cockpit. Bomb aimers drill the L-shaped wooden sights fixed to the perspex, aligning distant towers on the dam until geometry becomes instinct. Wireless operators count off timing checks and fuel states while the flight engineer listens to a language of temperature needles and manifold pressure. Every fluctuation is a sentence that ends in safe or not safe. Veterans who live to old age would later describe the night air as a physical thing. It slams at 60 feet. It claws at the fuselage on ridge crossings. Over water, it turns glassy and deceptive, lulling the eye until the first bounce of the aircraft warns of disaster. Crews practice recovery again and again. Ease forward. Add power. Do not climb too fast. Reset the spotlights. Try again. There are quiet moments. A moon breaks cover, and for a heartbeat, the reservoir shines like polished steel. A church spire flashes by, so close that the gunner sucks breath and tastes cordite from last week's live fire. Then the dark folds in again, and only the instruments speak. Instructors demand clean turns that hold height within a hand's width. They demand discipline that survives flak and searchlight. They demand calm when a sheep fence appears ahead at closing speed, and the only answer is a measured nudge on the yoke and a trust that training is thicker than fear. By the final rehearsals, the crews move as one machine. The pilot's left hand is the engineer's gauge. The navigator's pencil is the bomb aimer's horizon. The gunner's scan is a metronome that steadies the route. They do not think about the weapon in the bay or what a wall of water can do to a valley at night. Training is its own weather. It wraps around them as they lift from the practice run and turn for home. Engines even, altitudes exact, ready to carry this hard-won precision into a sky that will show no mercy. In the dim interior of the Lancaster, the instruments glow like a small constellation. Every crew position is a moving part in a single machine. Yet the true edge tonight is not horsepower or armor. It is the precision of simple tools forced into perfection by relentless training. The Aldous altimeter, the paired spotlights, the modified sights on the bomb aimer's frame. Each device converts darkness and fear into measurable facts. The Aldous lamps live beneath the fuselage, angled so their beams meet only at a specific height. At 200 feet, the circles are far apart on the water. At 100, they creep closer. At 60 feet, they kiss into a single bright coin on the ripples. Veterans remember the ritual with almost religious care. Keep the coin steady. Do not chase it. Hold it like a nerve held steady in a surgeon's hand. In trial runs, men learned that a fraction of a second of drift meant an entire bomb skipping long or short. Over reservoirs and practice lakes, the coin became a discipline that settled the aircraft and the mind. The navigator rides the map like a tide, but he too trusts the tools. The pilot's hand rests on throttle and yoke while the engineer watches manifold pressure and revs. The wireless operator hears the ether hiss and keeps silence. Far forward, the bomb aimer crouches over a sight that is no longer standard issue. Wooden frames bolted to the perspex form a V match to the towers and abutments of each target dam. When the two landmarks sit inside the arms of that V at the correct scale, range is true. Trials at Reculver taught crews how the geometry lies at speed and at night. Veterans speak of counting heartbeats as the V settles. The body wants a tense. The method demands stillness. The weapon spins unseen, a heavy cylinder running up to speed under the belly. Rotation is life. At roughly 230 miles per hour, at 60 feet of altitude, the spin gives the weapon a stubborn mind. It will cling to the dam wall after the final skip and bite downward against the stone. Without that rotation, the water would swallow it early or toss it away. Ground crews readied clutches and belts through long evenings, hands black with grease. Air crews learned to feel the vibration rise through the frame and knew the moment when the weapon was alive. Every step has a number. Release speed, release height, release range. Even the angle of approach is fixed to avoid towers, trees, and surface chop. Crews memorized corrections for wind and surface glare. They taped over dials they did not need. They marked pencil lines on perspex where the official scale fell short. Veterans recall how the cockpit smells of hot electrics and damp wool and the faint metallic scent of oxygen. Fear is present, but the tools place it at arm's length by replacing doubt with procedure. Over black water, the coin of light steadies. The V cradles the towers. The airframe is a hell breath. The pilot holds the line. The bomb aimer calls the cadence that every crew drilled until it entered muscle memory. The release is not a shout, but a decision executed at the exact second the geometry demands. In the wake, white arcs fold back upon themselves, and the aircraft lifts cleanly, climbing over the wall and the tracer. Behind them, the weapon skips, grips, and vanishes. The tools have done their work. The river will speak next. They did not pick targets at random. Intelligence officers laid out the Ruhr like a machine that breathed water. The Moen Dam fed canals, cooled furnaces, and steady pressure for pumping stations that kept steel and chemical plants alive. The Eder Reservoir, tucked in a winding valley, powered grids and buffered river flow that downstream workshops relied on. The Sorp, built as an earth and stone colossus, guarded a separate watershed whose steady release protected factories from drought and flood. Break any one and production stumbles. Break several in one night, and the industrial heart of Germany inhales dust. Aerial photographs showed intake towers, spillways, and service roads picked out by winter light. Analysts traced blue pencil lines from each dam to pumping houses, and then to names the crews knew from the papers and from friends already lost over the Ruhr. Krupp, Huttenwerk, IG Farben. The map looked like a nervous system. Cut the arteries at the dams, and the nerves misfire across the whole body. Veterans remembered the briefing room as a quiet place, made smaller by the weight of the plan. They studied scale models that matched the photographs. They noted the flak boxes over the Ruhr and the comparative calm around the reservoirs. Calm was not safety. The Moen sat in an open bowl where an approach at wave height might be possible. But defenders could range guns down the valley, and strings of balloon cables could appear without warning. The Eder offered fewer guns, yet demanded vicious turns among hills that could throw a Lancaster into black water with one misjudged bank. The Sorp, with its earthen core, was a different kind of problem. A single blast would not do. It would ask for repeated runs at treetop height with minimal landmarks and maximum nerves. Barnes-Wallace argued through reports that a skipping bomb could deliver energy at the face of a dam where normal bombs wasted force upward. The crews took the mathematics and translated it into flying tasks. Hold 18 meters. Hold 230 knots. Hit the release point with the converging beams locked together. If the physics worked, the Moen would crumble first and the shock would race down canals, drowning turbines and silting intakes. The Eder would follow, sending a wall that tore at bridges and mills. The Sorp, even if not breached, would have to be drained for inspection, robbing the system of volume at the height of a critical season. The decision settled on a sequence that balanced effect and risk. Moen for the greatest networked damage. Eder for a second blow that multiplied chaos. Sorp as the stubborn target that could still force the enemy to bleed time and labor. Crews signed their forms, folded their maps, and took one last look at the models. The targets mattered because water was the Ruhr's hidden fuel, and that night the plan was to steal it. The wind comes off the Kent coast as a cold, steady breath. On the firing line at Culver, engineers and air crews gather around chalk diagrams and a squat steel cylinder that looks nothing like a conventional weapon. The mine is designed to skip. It must leave the sea, touch down again and again, shedding speed in controlled leaps, then strike the dam wall and sink against it before the hydrostatic fuse wakes. Early trials are clumsy. Cylinders dig into the chop and vanish. Others shear sideways and threaten the observation boats. The lesson is simple and brutal. Precision is not optional. Precision is survival. Crews adapt with methodical patience. They practice level flight so low that white tops smear the perspex. The new converging spotlight system becomes a ritual. 2 lamps under the fuselage carve pale spears down into the dark water. When the beams meet in a single almond of light on the surface, the aircraft is at the correct height. There is no room for guesswork. Engineers dial in the backspin mechanism. The mine is spun to a harbor before release. The gyroscopic hum thrums through the Lancaster and into the ribs of the men who must make the run. Veterans who stood on those shingle banks remember a smell of fuel and salt and hot metal. One armorer later recalled how hands grew numb from manhandling the grease cylinder under blackout hoods while waves lapped and a searchlight from a distant battery probed the sky out of habit. A pilot remembered the way the coastline crept by at training speed, how the altimeter needles trembled, and how the navigator's voice stayed calm as a metronome while the sea tried to pull the aircraft down. From the coast, the training shifts inland to reservoirs and valleys that mimic the German targets. The Derwent and Ibrook waters become classrooms of wind and reflection. Crews learn how hills create sudden sink, how glassy surfaces steal depth perception, how a single degree of bank at low altitude can bend a release point beyond redemption. Bomb aimers drill the geometry until it enters muscle and breath. The viewing triangle is set against skyline towers. The stopwatch is married to airspeed, and the range to the wall is measured by the visual spacing of dam towers fixed into a simple wooden sight. In the hangars, the ground teams refine everything that touches the weapon. Suspension lugs are rechecked, safety pins rehearsed, spin motors bench tested. The big bomb doors are removed, and the belly is fared to accept the rotating drum. It is inelegant and it works. Night after night, the squadron flies until the map of England is a weave of pencil lines and coffee rings. The crews are young and become old in a month. Combat readiness does not arrive as a trumpet call. It accumulates. It lives in the way a flight engineer sets power while his eyes track oil pressure without conscious thought. It lies in the quiet nod between bomb aimer and pilot when the spotlight almond is perfect. It is the certainty that the mine will clear the first wave, grip the air with backspin, and walk across the water in measured strides. By the time the final coastal trials sign off, No. 617 Squadron has turned a desperate concept into a repeatable act. On the last dusk at Ruhr, the cylinder leaps true and drives on, a gray shape on a darker sea, and every man present understands that the next time the spray rises, it will rise from a valley in Germany. The doors of the briefing room at RAF Scampton open and the crews file in, faces drawn after days of low-level training. On the wall, the map is still damp from the glue, strings pulled taut across the North Sea, the WW2, and deep into the Ruhr. Wing Commander Guy Gibson stands at the front with the navigation and meteorology officers. The time blocks are written in red pencil. Takeoff after dusk. Targets before dawn. No second night. The deadline is not a line on the map. It is the moon and the reservoirs and the lives already committed. Folders slide across the tables. Inside are routes set in 5-minute legs, altitudes written in ink that looks too small for what is being asked. 60 feet over water, 220 miles per hour. A special weapon mounted in the bomb bay. A spinning cylinder that must be released at the precise speed and height so that it skips across the surface and strikes the dam face. The air smells of boot polish, canvas, and stale tea. A meteorology officer speaks about cloud at low level over the Dutch coast and a fitful wind along the valleys. The room is quiet in the way of men listening for what they cannot control. Les Monroe later recalled the tension that crept up the spine when the curtain on secrecy finally fell. He knew the training at Derwent and Ruhr had not been for show. The converging spotlight system, 2 beams set in the belly, would meet on the water only at the correct height. Bomb aimers had wooden sights cut to the geometry of towers on a dam. Flight engineers would watch engine temps climb as the Big Merlins worked hard at hedge height. Gunners would look forward as much as aft, hunting pylons and wires. Names are called: Hopgood, McCarthy, Martin, Young, Maltby, Shannon, Maudsley Knight, Estelle, Barlow, Rice. Crews glance at each other and then back to the map. The first wave will strike the Moan, then the Eder. A separate force is detailed for the Sorp, with a different profile because its earthen core will not yield to a straight skipping run. Timings stack like dominoes. 5 minutes late on the coast becomes darkness lost in the valley. A navigation officer traces the low route along canals and church spires that will slide past at mast height. A weapons officer demonstrates the arming panel. Backspin to 500 revolutions per minute. Safe until the run begins. Release only when the 2 amber spotlights touch as a single oval on the surface and when the tower spacing matches the simple sight. Bomb aimers rehearse the cadence of the run in their heads. Pilots note fuel figures in diversion fields they likely will not reach. Ground crew wait outside with chalk tires and taped seams. The Lancasters already modified, turrets slimmed, bomb doors removed, the base shrouded for the strange cylinder. A hush settles as Gibson closes his folder. There is no rhetoric. The task is defined by numbers and by the short night. Veterans remembered the scrape of chairs on the floor and the way voices dropped to a practical murmur. Checklists begin to speak for them. Mae West's, silk maps, morphine syrettes for the med kit, Aldous lamps for signaling, compasses swung, altimeters set. Outside, the light is turning the color of wet slate. Engines will start soon, and the briefing that set an impossible deadline will dissolve into the rhythm of throttles and the black line of the route ahead. Into the night, the Lancasters lift from the runway, heavy with upkeep and fuel, their exhausts tracing dim comets across a sky without a moon. At the end of the perimeter, lights the world narrows to compass, stopwatch, and the pale glow of the map. Radio silence holds like a vow. The crew settle into the rhythm of low flight, a steady hum that vibrates through ribs and seat rails. Veterans later remember a taste of metal on the tongue, the mind's edge sharpened by fear and training. The route is a thread pulled taut from coast to target. Across the North Sea at wave height, the altimeter needles quiver, the sea surface a black skin that rises and falls. The navigator counts off legs by dead reckoning, G mostly unreliable at this height and at this hour. Every minute is a distance. Every landmark is a confirmation that they still exist in the correct place upon a map. The flight engineer trims throttles to hold speed, not too fast to waste fuel, not too slow to surrender lift. The Dutch coast arrives without ceremony, only a darker line becoming fields and dikes. Now the work becomes intricate. The pilot rides the contours, easing over tree lines, flattening out over canals, dipping where fog sinks into hollows. Converging spotlights in the nose tell him the exact 18 meters over water when the time comes. But for now, they are hooded, the cockpit kept as dark as a chapel. Gunners scan for flak bursts, listening for the thin whine that arrives before impact. Some crews will see farmhouses slide by with windows curtained, others a cyclist frozen on a dike, face turned to the sound that passes like a storm. Bridges appear and vanish. Rail lines cross under the wing, and the blackout turns every village into a geometry of threat. The wireless operator sits hands ready but idle, the discipline absolute. A call may save one crew, but doom the formation. Silence protects more than it exposes. Below, rivers gleam like graphite under the faint starlight. The navigator marks each bend, each junction, matching them to the trace on the chart, pencil tapping a metronome against the board. In the Ruhr, approaches the air grows rough with flak. The pilot holds level and commits. To climb is to invite the predictors. To slow is to become a painted target. Low flying defeats the geometry of guns, but it demands absolute focus. A sudden ridge threatens the port wingtip, and the aircraft hauls up a hand's breadth, then settles again. The bomb aimer checks fusing pins by touch, rehearses the release sequence in his head. The engineer confirms fuel balance. Breath fogs the mask. The crew move as one mind. Ahead lies the dark shape of the valley, and beyond it the dams. The route has delivered them through night and weather and the measured malice of defenses. They arrive not as wanderers, but as an instrument brought to its mark, every second purchased by silence, nerve, and the hard school of low flight. Engines drone at a constant, bone-deep rumble as the Lancaster schemes the black surface of the reservoir. The crew keeps voices level and clipped, every syllable nested inside training. The altimeter jitters. The twin spotlights under the fuselage paint a shallow V on the water. When the cones meet, height is right. 60 feet. The bomb bay holds a single cylindrical weapon, spinning hard to bite the water and skip toward the dam face. The gunner tracks tracer arcing from the flak towers that guard the arc of concrete. Searchlights rake the surface, find spray, then silhouette a wingtip. The pilot eases the yoke, the flight engineer nudges throttle, and the navigator counts the time to run in from the last turn over the treeline. Veterans later recalled the feel of the aircraft at this height, a heavy plank on rough air, the reservoir smell of algae and cordite mingling, the cockpit dials glowing in dim red. They remembered how the converging beams became a lifeline, and how every instinct screamed to climb. Discipline kept them level. The bomb aimer rides the sight, calls corrections in half degrees, and watches the dam grow wide and close, a dark wall shouldering the night. The engineer confirms speed, a hair over 200 miles per hour, where the weapons spin and the water skin will align. The first run breaks the rhythm. Flak thumps the air, and the bomb aimer waves off. The pilot banks low, the lake's surface rushing the side window, and they circle for another approach. A second aircraft drops in trail, its spotlight V settling, its course nearly identical to the leader's. Crews later describe time compressing into breath-length segments. Set height, hold speed, steady wings. Release point fixes against the dam towers by train geometry. The bomb leaves with a lurch, the airframe suddenly light, and the cylinder hits the reservoir with a hard, skipping slap. It kisses the water again and again, then bites under and drives into the dam's base. The shock reaches back through the surface. A dull underwater concussion heaves the reservoir. The crew feels it in their feet and seat rails. The pilot hauls gently, clearing spray and fire, while the rear gunner watches the strike zone through a lattice of tracer. White boil erupts against the concrete, then settles. Not yet. The next aircraft commits. Another timed leg, another crisp release. Another deep detonation shudders the valley. On the third attack, searchlights tangle the leader and burst stitch near the starboard engine. Still the run continues, the aimer calling tiny corrections until the sight brackets the towers. Release. The weapon skips true and disappears into a sudden bruise of foam. This time the shock lifts as a rolling pulse. A white scar appears along the crest. It widens with a groan the crew cannot hear, but somehow senses. The wall fractures into movement. Water climbs itself and topples outward. They bank away as the first wall of water rears, incandescent in the searchlights, then pours through the gap with a speed that erases scale. A valley becomes a river of impact. The intercom fills with controlled exhale, checklists, and a navigator marking time. Later testimonies speak of elation checked by the knowledge of loss, of empty call signs, of the sudden quiet when engines throttle back for the homeward leg. Behind them, the reservoir is no longer a mirror but a force, and the dam is no longer a line but a breach. Precision, repetition, and nerve had turned theory into a ruptured wall, and the night over the moan changed from geometry to flood. Wind funnels through the Eder Valley like a living thing, lifting spray off the dark reservoir. The crews of 617 Squadron arrive after moan, guided by dead reckoning, stopwatch, and the dull glow of villages massed to slits. The dam below is quiet and almost undefended, but the approach is a trap. Ridges crowd the water. The final run demands a dive into the basin, a climbing turnaround spur, then a fast S to line up dead center. One gunner later recalled how the altimeter needles wobbled, as if nervous, and the black surface rose toward the Lancaster like a wall. The pilot levels at 60 feet, trusting two converging spotlights to kiss in a white disc on the water. The bomb spins under the belly at furious revolutions, whining through the airframe. The bomb aimer braces at the blister window, his forearms pressed to the wooden sight. When the dam towers sit exactly on the pegs, the range has collapsed to a few heartbeats of runway. The flight engineer calls speed, the navigator rides the drift, the rear gunner watches the cliff that seems intent on swallowing the tail. The first attack is waved off. Turbulence ripples the lake. A crosswind shoves the bomber, and the valley snatches the alignment away. They climb hard, skirting treetops, then drop again into the bowl. On the second pass, a pall of mist blooms, and the aimer loses the towers. A third run is set up with deliberate calm. The pilot banks around the spur, so tightly the wingtip seems to scrape the hillside. The disc of light locks. The towers nest into the sight. The call to release is a clean note on the intercom. Upkeep departs, backspinning, skips once, twice, then bites and disappears along the face. A heartbeat later, the dam shudders. Water boils upward in a pale dome. The aircraft claws for height, engines straining as the blast strikes the tail and rice papers the crew with dust. In the mirror, the neat geometry of masonry is buckling into a roaring breach. A veteran would later remember the smell of wet stone and oil drifting into the fuselage, and the way men fell silent when the valley lights flickered out. They mark the breach, circle once to confirm, and turn for home on a compass course scratched in grease pencil. Fuel is tight, nerves are taut, and the valley that tried to hold them now slides behind. The Eder has been opened. The crew says nothing. The altimeter steadies. England lies somewhere beyond a chain of dark rivers and an empty sky. Night over the Sauerland is thick with haze and valley winds. The Sorp is not a concrete wall like Möhne or Eder. It is an earth embankment with a concrete core, squat and stubborn, and it will not yield to a skipping weapon on open water. The plan is different. Fly along the crest, level with the parapet, and place the mine against the upstream face. No espin, no ricochet. Precision at knife edge height. Pilot Joe McCarthy brings the Lancaster in over dark ridges and scattered rooflines. The reservoir is a dull strip of pewter. The crew runs the checks. Height by Aldous lamps. Speed steady. Bomb doors. The bomb aimer, George Johnson of 617 Squadron, studies the dam crown and the landmark of a chapel and village lights tucked beyond the valley. He would later remember the strange quiet here. Little flak. No searchlights to fight. Only air currents rolling off the hills and the endless need to be perfect. First run. Too high. Second. Drifting left of the crown. Third. Turbulence in the lee of the embankment bumps the sight picture just as the count begins. They pull away and circle again, engines humming a steady threat to anyone listening in the dark. On the intercom, the voices stay clipped and calm, each correction building a map of the approach. The tail recalls a crosswind nibbling at the fin. The engineer trims power. The navigator calls headings that thread the ridges with meters to spare. Run after run, the valley teaches them its terms. Turn in later. Hold the line 2 seconds longer. Keep the port wing just above the parapet stones. On the 10th, approach the aircraft settles into the groove. Height right. Speed right. Johnson rides the sight across the crest and calls release. The weapon drops clean and vanishes against the black water and the dam face. A pulse kicks the airframe. Seconds later, a heavy underground thud folds into the hill and slaps the crew in the chest. Spray rises. A scar shows on the embankment, but the Sorp holds. Partial damage. No breach. They orbit once, twice, scanning for signs of failure, then turn for home through cloud and fatigue. Later analysis will count the run attempts, the exact line of attack, the crater, and the stability of an earth dam built for punishment. The lesson is plain. Courage and skill can deliver the weapon to the inch, yet design and geology can still deny a decisive break. Here, persistence wrote the story, and success came in fractions. Night gives way to a cold dawn over the Ruhr, and the cost is written in drifting smoke and broken water. 19 Lancasters left their English fields on May 16, 1943. 8 never returned. In the debrief rooms of 617 Squadron, empty chairs mark crews lost to flak bursts, searchlight cones, and cruel luck over black water. Ground crewmen speak in low voices about aircraft that taxied out and did not roll back in. Veteran navigators recall the white glare of the Möhne and Eder valleys. The way altimeters quivered as pilots held 18 meters above the surface, and the jolt that ran through every rib when a dam face filled the windscreen. They remember radio silence, the thud of a hit, the sudden vanishing of a wingman into darkness. Far below, the flood races through sleeping towns. Survivors tell of a roar like tearing iron and a wall that carried trees, carts, cattle, and the lamps of villages. Many of the dead are civilians, including foreign laborers forced into factories. Numbers vary in the fog of aftermath, but the toll runs into the many hundreds, more than 1,000 by most counts. Bridges fold, rail lines wash out, turbines seize with silt. Rescue parties work through silted streets, while in Britain families wait for telegrams that decide a lifetime. The raid achieves what it set out to prove. 2 dams are breached, industry shutters, and the enemy diverts men, guns, and concrete to guard reservoirs across Germany. Yet the strategic ledger is mixed. Repair battalions move fast, patchwork holds, and power output climbs back within months. Historians trace a dip in steel and coal, then a stubborn recovery. The true gains lie elsewhere. The operation shows that low-level precision at night is possible. New squadrons will learn from navigation, the timing, the discipline under fire. Morale rises at home in a season when it is sorely needed, and a legend forms around a number that will fly again and again. By the time the squadron disperses from the briefing huts, 53 airmen are confirmed dead and 3 are prisoners. Mechanics fold maps, armorers sweep spent links from hangar floors. The water is still falling in the valleys, and the price of the breach is now part of the war. The night after the dams fell, the echoes were not only in the valleys. They lived in the crews who came home and in those who did not. 19 Lancasters had launched into darkness with a new weapon and a narrow margin for error. 8 did not return. Survivors spoke later of the hush after engine cut down, of the altimeter lamps that seemed too bright, of water that looked like polished slate until it erupted into a wall. The results were undeniable and complicated. The Möhne and Eder dams were breached. The Sorp was scarred but standing. Floods tore through the Ruhr, destroying power lines, rail spurs, bridges, and workshops. Thousands of workers and civilians were driven from their homes. More than 1,000 people died, many of them forced laborers whose names rarely appeared on official rolls. In the days that followed, German recovery crews moved fast. Speer redirected labor, materials, and flak to protect and repair the water system. Power and production rebounded within months, but only after a costly diversion of resources at a moment when the Reich could least afford it. For the air crews, the lessons were etched into muscle memory. Low-level navigation in hostile terrain demanded absolute discipline. The converging spotlight altimeter worked, but only if height, speed, and release angle remained exact. Formation spread kept one loss from becoming many, yet increased the risk of single aircraft isolation. Briefings stressed that a special weapon did not reduce the need for ordinary airmanship. Debriefs noted map reading errors, radio failures, and the fatiguing strain of continuous hedge-hopping at night. Chastise also reshaped the squadron. 617 was kept as a precision unit. Crews trained for Tallboy and Grand Slam, striking viaducts, U-boat pins, and the battleship Tirpitz. The public saw daring and ingenuity. The veterans felt pride in absence. Some remembered the silent glide before bomb release more clearly than the cheers on the runway. Others kept a torn map, a bent kneeboard, or a crew list with names crossed out in pencil. The legacy is precise courage and its cost. Chastise proved that precision could change the shape of a campaign, if only for a time. It also proved that courage is not a substitute for strategy, but a tool within it.